Have you ever wondered why certain people seem to carry an invisible authority wherever they go? They don't raise their voices. They don't beg for attention. They don't demand explanations. Instead, they do something far more powerful. They withhold. They retreat. They choose not to respond. And suddenly the entire atmosphere around them shifts. People begin to question. Some grow restless. Others chase. The silence itself becomes a gravitational force. Now pause for a second and imagine what would happen if you lived this way. Imagine choosing silence instead of your usual explanations. Imagine stepping back instead of pouring yourself out. Imagine deciding that not every message deserves an immediate answer, that not every request deserves a yes, that not every provocation deserves your emotional fire. What would change in your life if you stopped being permanently available? This is where the hidden truth lies. The world gets used to controlling you by predicting you, by relying on your instant reaction, by expecting you to show up on demand, emotionally, physically, psychologically. The moment you refuse to play that role, the game changes. Those who once thought they knew you suddenly realize they never knew you at all.
Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That irritation, yours or theirs, always reveals something deeper. When you become inaccessible, who panics first? Who tries to provoke you into reacting just to feel that old sense of control? Their reaction says more about them than it does about you. But it also says something crucial about how much of your own energy you've been giving away without even noticing. Every time you respond too quickly, every time you justify yourself, every time you give explanations no one actually asked for, you leak energy. And at the end of the day, what are you left with? A hollow exhaustion, a quiet frustration you can't fully name. And the reason is simple. You have been available for far too long to people who never deserved your availability in the first place. This isn't about turning your back on the world. This isn't about cutting ties with everyone. This is about choosing yourself. Jung called this the path of individuation, the slow and deliberate process of becoming whole, authentic, complete. And that process doesn't begin with more noise, more effort, more explaining. It begins with silence. It begins with the choice to stop being a puppet whose strings are pulled by other people's moods and demands.
So let me ask you, how much of your life has been spent reacting instead of choosing? How many times have you felt like you were on stage in someone else's play, saying lines you never wrote, repeating patterns you never wanted to live? The moment you stop being available, everything shifts. Some people will call you distant. Others will call you selfish. But those words are just projections, because what they really mean is, you no longer serve my comfort. From childhood onward, you were likely taught to equate availability with love, to say yes when you wanted to say no, to answer immediately, to show up even when you were exhausted, to smile when you wanted to cry. That conditioning carved into you the illusion that your worth depends on your usefulness to others. But here's a truth most people never tell you. Excessive availability is not kindness. It is self-abandonment disguised as virtue. And as long as you keep believing that your presence must always be on demand, you'll continue being drained, manipulated, and discarded the moment you are no longer useful. Why? Because what is predictable becomes a tool, and what is always accessible loses its value. When you are permanently available, you are not being loved, you are being used. And the day you decide to stop playing that role, the entire dynamic collapses.
In the next part, we will dive into something Carl Jung considered central to the human psyche: psychic energy. Because this is not just about setting boundaries. This is about learning that your inner energy is finite, and that every careless reaction leaks power into the hands of those who never deserved it in the first place. But before we go there, remember this: when you stop being available, everything changes, and the very first change begins inside of you. Carl Jung never saw the human mind as a cold machine, a machine reacting to external triggers without consequence. For him, the psyche is an energy system, one with limits, one that must be guarded. Every thought consumes fuel, every emotion spends power, every action withdraws from an inner reservoir, and that reservoir, unlike the illusions we are taught, is not infinite. So the real question is, are you deciding where your energy flows? Or are you allowing the world to dictate its direction? Every time you defend yourself against a criticism that didn't deserve your attention, you spend psychic energy. Every time you rush to respond to a message out of fear that silence will offend, you spend psychic energy. Every time you involve yourself in a debate designed only to drain you, you spend psychic energy. And worst of all, every time you remain available to those who never valued you in the first place, you spend psychic energy. And what remains? Exhaustion. That dull, heavy exhaustion that makes you question why life feels so empty, even though you've been doing everything right.
Jung observed a painful truth. That which you resist persists. The more you fight, the more you react, the more you bind yourself to the very dynamics you wish to escape. Those who live chronically drained are not inherently weak. They are simply misdirected. Their energy is pouring into the wrong vessels. And here's the danger. A drained person becomes a vulnerable person. When your inner reserves are depleted, you become easy prey. Manipulators sense it. Opportunists smell it. Needy people notice it instantly. They see that you cannot guard your own field, that you leak energy at every provocation, and they exploit it. They don't need force. They don't need to scream. All they need is to press the buttons you have left exposed, and you will hand them your energy on a silver platter. A healthy psyche, Jung taught, is one that knows how to conserve energy within the system. This doesn't mean cold detachment. It means mastery. The ability to say no without apology. The ability to remain silent without feeling cowardly. The ability to observe without rushing to act. Because true strength is never in reacting, it is in choosing. And choice only appears when you stop being automatically available to every demand placed upon you.
Think for a moment. How many sleepless nights have you endured because of an unresolved conversation?
How many hours have you lost replaying what you should have said, or why someone treated you poorly? Every one of those cycles is energy being siphoned. You are feeding ghosts that should have long been laid to rest. Psychic energy works like a field. When protected, it radiates presence. You enter a room and respect follows, not because you demanded it, but because your inner economy is intact. When wasted, you fade into invisibility. You overreact, you stumble, you explain too much, you apologize too often. And the world, merciless as it is, recognizes the difference instantly. This is why learning where your energy escapes is essential. What are the triggers that make you lose your center? What situations instantly provoke your availability, your explanation, your defense? These are the exact points where the leak begins. Your work is not to become cold, distant, indifferent. Your work is to become selective, sovereign, available only by choice, not by compulsion. And here we touch one of Jung's most powerful insights. When you begin to guard your energy, the projections others place upon you start to collapse.
This is the moment the game changes. And this is precisely the moment many around you will resist. Because your unavailability doesn't just disturb their comfort, it exposes their own shadows. In the next part, we will explore this darker territory. How manipulative people feed on your availability, how projection works as an unconscious mechanism, and why withdrawing disarms the entire system they use to keep you entangled. But remember, none of this begins with them. It begins with you. The day you stop being automatically available is the day you reclaim your energy, and everything changes. Have you ever noticed how easily someone can push your buttons? They don't have to shout, they don't have to threaten, they don't even have to ask. All they need is to trigger the patterns you've left exposed, and without realizing it, you play your role perfectly. We like to believe our choices are conscious, deliberate, entirely our own. But here lies the truth. Most of your emotional reactions are pre-programmed, and those who understand this don't need power. They only need access.
Carl Jung called this projection, the unconscious act of casting onto others what we refuse to face within ourselves. But projection isn't a one-way street. While others project, you also accept. And the moment you remain endlessly available, you become a blank canvas for everyone else's shadows. Think for a second. That friend who only calls when their world collapses. That partner who leans on you every time chaos erupts. That colleague who praises you only when you're useful. They are not relating to you. They are relating to the role you've been performing. And why do you keep performing? Fear. Fear of disappointing. Fear of being unloved. Fear of being abandoned. So you keep showing up, keep giving, keep explaining, until your life becomes a script written by someone else's unresolved needs. But here's the danger. The strongest manipulation doesn't even need words. It thrives in silence, your silence, the silence of guilt, the silence of obligation, the silence that whispers, "If I don't help, I'll lose them."
And so you make yourself available again. You answer the late-night call. You soothe the unnecessary drama. You bend your schedule, your emotions, your entire being just to hold someone else together. Until one day, you stop.
And that's when everything shifts. When you stop reacting, the script falls apart. When you stop explaining, the mask slips. When you stop rescuing, they no longer recognize you. Because, for the first time, they are forced to confront themselves. Your absence becomes their mirror, your silence their echo. And most people cannot bear it. So, they attack. They criticize. They dramatize. They call you selfish, distant, cold. But it is not about you. It is about the collapse of their control. Jung once wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And when you withdraw, you drag those hidden shadows into the light. That light unsettles them, but it frees you. So, let me ask you, are you ready to endure the discomfort of being misunderstood? Are you prepared for the accusations that will come when you stop being endlessly available? Can you sit in the silence that feels empty at first, but slowly begins to reveal its strength? Because it is in that silence, and only in that silence, that a new kind of power is born. And this leads us to the next step, the weapon most people never master, the power of silence. Why it disarms control, why it terrifies manipulators, why it transforms you from predictable to untouchable. We live in an age of endless noise. Everyone is speaking, everyone is posting, everyone is desperate to be heard, to be validated, to win arguments that don't matter, even if it costs them their peace. But beneath all the chaos lies a force sharper than any clever reply, stronger than any outburst. That force is silence. Not the silence of weakness, not the silence of resignation, not the silence of passivity. I am talking about a conscious silence, a deliberate silence, a silence so intentional that it becomes presence. This silence unsettles because it refuses to be manipulated. It changes the rules of the game entirely.
Jung never saw silence as emptiness. He saw it as fertile ground. Silence is not absence. Silence is space. And within that space, clarity is born. Because when you stop reacting, you begin observing. And when you observe, patterns appear. You start to see the cycles, the manipulations, the provocations, the emotional traps. What once felt random suddenly reveals itself as a system designed to keep you reacting. And your silence is the first step to breaking the system. Think for a moment. Why do some people panic when you don't answer immediately, when you don't explain, when you don't justify? Do they really miss you, or do they miss the control they had over you? Your silence strips them of their script, and without your predictable lines, they are left with only themselves. That is what terrifies them. As long as you speak, you are inside their game. But when you are silent, you rewrite the rules. This is why silence feels so dangerous to those who depend on your availability. Because silence is not passive. Silence is resistance. Silence is sovereignty. True silence is mastery over your energy. The refusal to be dragged into chaos that does not belong to you.
the discipline to withhold, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. But silence has a cost. It will distance you from those who only valued your usefulness. It will confuse those who only knew you through the roles you performed. It will disturb those who thrived on your predictability. They will say you are arrogant. They will call you distant. They will accuse you of changing. And they will be right. You have changed. Because silence makes you selective. Silence makes you sovereign. Silence reveals that words are not free. Every sentence is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes the greatest act of power is not speaking, but withholding, not explaining, but observing, not defending, but walking away. Because silence forces others to hear what they've been running from all along, their own noise, their own shadows, their own emptiness.
Yet the greatest power of silence is not what it does to others. The greatest power of silence is what it rebuilds within you. In silence, you gather back the fragments you scattered through endless availability. In silence, you reconnect with the center you abandoned in order to please. In silence, you begin to feel whole again. But silence will hurt at first. It will feel like loss. It will feel like rejection. It will feel unnatural. Yet with time, you realize that this pain was purification, the burning away of roles that never belonged to you. And once that burning is complete, silence no longer feels heavy. Silence becomes freedom. In the next part, we will explore this freedom more deeply, because silence is only the foundation. What you build on top of it determines whether you collapse back into old patterns or finally become whole. Silence alone is not the destination. It is the doorway. Because once you stop reacting, once you stop explaining, once you stop leaking energy into battles that were never yours, you face a new challenge.
What will you do with the power you just reclaimed? Carl Jung believed psychic energy is never destroyed. It can be wasted, it can be misdirected, it can be suppressed, but it always flows somewhere. When you stop pouring it into meaningless conflicts, it doesn't vanish, it returns to you. And that return can feel overwhelming. At first, it may even feel uncomfortable. You will notice more clarity, yet more restlessness. More strength, yet more responsibility. Because when energy comes back, it demands direction. And without direction, you risk falling again into the same traps. Reactivity, people-pleasing, availability without boundaries. So the real question becomes, how do you use this recovered power? This is where selectivity enters. Not everyone deserves your time. Not every situation deserves your presence. Not every demand deserves your response. To live as if your energy were infinite is to live in delusion. To live as if your energy is sacred, that is sovereignty. Think of it this way. If your psyche were a temple, who would you allow to enter? Would you leave the doors open for every wanderer, every opportunist, every thief? Or would you protect the entrance, allowing only those who arrive with respect, with intention, with reverence?
Most people live as though their inner temple were a train station, open 24/7, crowded, chaotic, full of noise. No wonder they feel drained. Jung's insight was simple but brutal. Without boundaries, individuation is impossible. If you are available to everyone, you belong to no one, not even to yourself. Reclaiming your energy means building an inner economy. You stop spending where there is no return. You stop investing in relationships that drain instead of nourish. You stop explaining yourself to those who only want to misunderstand. And you redirect all of this power into what truly matters: creation, growth, vision, purpose. And here lies the paradox that few understand. When you stop being available to everyone, the right people finally appear. Because the ones who thrived on your exhaustion disappear the moment you refuse to feed them. But the ones who resonate with your wholeness are drawn to the strength you now radiate. Availability breeds parasites. Selectivity attracts allies.
Reclaiming energy also transforms how you carry yourself. Suddenly, you are no longer rushing, no longer chasing, no longer over-explaining. You walk slower, but heavier. You speak less, but your words weigh more. You do less, but everything you do leaves a mark. And those around you will notice. Some will resent it, others will respect it, but no one will ignore it. Because when you reclaim your energy, you stop existing as background noise. You become signal, presence, gravity. But beware, this path requires courage. Selectivity will feel like loss. Old identities will dissolve. Relationships built on your availability will collapse. And in the ruins of what was familiar, you will be tempted to return, tempted to explain, tempted to justify, tempted to reopen the doors you just closed. Resist this temptation, because the void left behind is not emptiness. It is space, space for what truly belongs to you. And this leads us to the final revelation, the transformation that occurs when you live no longer as a hostage to other people's needs, but as the guardian of your own soul. This is not isolation. This is not coldness. This is individuation, the becoming of a whole, undivided self. In the next part, we will arrive at the culmination of this journey, the rebirth that occurs when you fully embody unavailability, not as rejection of the world, but as the creation of a new world, a world in which you finally belong to yourself. Every ending is a beginning in disguise. When you first stop being available, it feels like death. Death of roles you once played, death of identities you thought defined you, death of relationships that survived only because you allowed yourself to be consumed. And yet, beyond that death, something else stirs. Carl Jung believed that the psyche, when stripped of its illusions, does not collapse. It regenerates, like a forest after fire, like skin after a wound. The human soul is designed to renew itself once the parasites are gone. But renewal is not automatic. It requires a choice. That choice is unavailability. Unavailability is not rejection of life. It is the protection of life.
It is the decision to no longer scatter your soul across obligations that have nothing to do with your purpose. It is the recognition that your time, your energy, your essence are sacred, and therefore cannot be offered without measure. And when you embody this, everything changes.
Suddenly, you realize you don't need to chase. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove. Your presence itself becomes enough. You walk into a room and people feel something has shifted. Not because you are louder, not because you are more aggressive, but because your energy is no longer leaking. It is radiating. This is the rebirth Jung hinted at when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole, of no longer living fragmented between what others demand and what your soul desires. Think of the difference. The available self was scattered, restless, reactive. The unavailable self is centered, calm, untouchable. The available self was always waiting for recognition. The unavailable self is recognition, self-sufficient, self-owned, sovereign. And here lies the paradox. When you finally stop being available to everyone, you become infinitely more valuable to the few who truly matter. The superficial disappears, the parasites retreat, and what remains is rare, profound, unshakable connection, because it is chosen, not coerced.
But there is more. This rebirth is not only about relationships with others, it is about your relationship with yourself. For the first time, you feel whole, not because the world accepts you, but because you no longer need it to. Unavailability is freedom. Freedom from the endless cycle of justification. Freedom from the tyranny of other people's expectations. Freedom from the noise that once dictated your every move. And in that freedom, you finally begin to live. Not as a reaction, not as a role, but as a presence, a force, a being untangled from the chains of false duty. This is the transformation. When you stop being available, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. And that is the true rebirth. Because only when you withdraw your energy from the unworthy can you finally invest it in what is eternal, your vision, your purpose, your becoming. And so we return to the truth that has been hidden all along. When you stop being available, everything changes. Everything begins the moment you decide to stop being available to everyone. That is the turning point. When you protect your energy, your life changes forever.
Unavailability is freedom. Freedom from the endless cycle of justification. Freedom from the tyranny of other people's expectations. Freedom from the noise that once dictated your every move. And in that freedom, you finally begin to live, not as a reaction, not as a role, but as a presence, a force, a being untangled from the chains of false duty. This is the transformation. When you stop being available, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. And that is the true rebirth. Because only when you withdraw your energy from the unworthy can you finally invest it in what is eternal. Your vision, your purpose, your becoming. And so we return to the truth that has been hidden all along. When you stop being available, everything changes. Everything begins the moment you decide to stop being available to everyone. That is the turning point.
When you protect your energy, your life changes forever. If this video resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and keep exploring for more videos like this.